All right.
Hey Ash, how you doing this week?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, good. So I wanted to jump on today and just I got this question through, and I thought it would be interesting for us to discuss and also add some value to our listeners. So I'll read you the question and then we will talk through it. Okay. This is from someone called Lee. They didn't provide much information, but they said this question. I've bought my first investment property December last year in Greenbank, Brisbane, Queensland for $1 million. It's renting for $1,000 per week. Since the tenants have moved in, there has been constant maintenance requests. What financial strategies would you recommend to balance the maintenance costs and maximize the returns? Am still yet to receive any rent.
Oh, and it's a high price property too. This is interesting with maintenance because I was doing some investor calls the other day where I touch base with clients and just go through maintenance to see, on a scale of 1 to 10, where it's sitting. Like, are they getting a lot of maintenance? Are they getting like not much? And what was actually interesting is what people's perception of maintenance is. So I had one client that thought that they had lots of maintenance during the last 12 months. And when I looked at it, I said, no, like you've had like 2 plumbers, 1 gutter clean, and 1 handyman or something. And I was like, that's actually really good for an older house over 12 months. I said, on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the most maintenance and 1 being nothing, I said, your property's probably at about a 3. So I'm very satisfied with the fact that the maintenance is at a reasonable level. But the investor actually thought they were getting quite a lot. So I guess part of the question is what's reasonable and what's not reasonable would be my first thing to point out. And then from there go, okay, well, what sort of problem do we have? Because I think if you were having, like, for example, because that's a very general question, if there was like lots of electrical work or lots of plumbing work, I've got some properties where there's loads of plumbing work constantly on the property and it is getting to a really excessive point. But what do? I mean, a burst pipe's a burst pipe. You can't not do it, but it's very high cost for the owner. So if you're finding that it's one genre of maintenance that is happening ongoing at the property, I would probably be definitely having the property manager, or the property manager should do this, or ask the plumber, can you please let me know what we can do as a long-term solution? So in my situation with this property with plumbing, the long-term solution would be to actually pay the extra money and replace the pipes, because the pipes are so old and they're cracking, as opposed to just sending out a plumber every time there's a crack or whatever. So it's if it's one genre, I would be asking the tradie to tell me what we can do to permanently fix the problem. But if we're finding that, it's a plumber, then it's electrician, then we had the gutters, then we had this, it's probably could be okay because it's not a repetition of the same person. I hope that makes sense, but that's sort of what I'm thinking.
Yeah, for sure. And you got to understand, even though it is obviously a high rent that you're getting, and even for that area, that's good, that when you're buying a property initially, obviously you get your building and pest reports. If you're buying a property and in that era, a lot of them are like 80s, 90s builds, massive houses. So when you have big properties and you're buying it fresh from the market, and a tenant's moved in, the tenant at that price point is going to have quite high expectations of everything being maintained constantly. So that's something that people need to go in with their eyes wide open. Like when you buy a property for 500 or 600,000 and the rent's maybe 1% or 700 or whatever it is, the expectations of the tenant are slightly lower than that premium tier, because, they're grateful for the home and it's kind of a different energy that goes with it, where as you go up over 950, the expectations of the tenants are high, as they probably should be, because they are paying such a huge portion of rent. So that's something to be mindful of. But I'll tell you now, the most maintenance anyone will ever get is in that first 12 months.
Yeah.
Especially if the property hasn't been maintained, or they bought it off an owner occupier who hasn't maintained it for a very long time. Like you said, There will be electrical stuff. There will be plumbing things that come up. Most of the times, the gutters will need to be cleaned. Obviously, if you're buying it from an owner occupier and it's not already tenanted, you're going to have to get that bond clean initially done, the yard's done. So I know that there is a lot when people are buying it, but you need to go eyes wide open and look at it for how it actually is. And that's when utilizing your property manager through that pre-purchase inspection and getting them out to do a pre-purchase inspection before you settle. They will see all those preventative maintenance things, because at the end of the day, you don't want to buy this property and then it become more run down by not doing basic maintenance. So I will say, like, it is hard when there's a lot of maintenance requests and it does feel constant.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Do
it's
you think
tough.
like sometimes I get tenants that report maintenance, and it's not necessarily because they want it done, but they also want to make sure they're protecting themselves, that they're not going to be responsible for something. So sometimes you can find that tenants are quite nervous with regards to like reporting, just because, like, if it breaks, they don't want you to think that it was them and then be responsible for it. So you can sometimes gauge whether that could be a situation as well.
Yeah, what I'd recommend as an action step is to make a plan with your property manager on, okay, what needs to be done urgently. If it all needs to be done urgently, like the security issues, if the locks aren't working or there's things leaking and that kind of stuff, unsafe light switches, all that things, that's going to need to be done, fairly quickly. And then make a plan with the tenant on when things will get done. But something to be mindful is at that price point, whether or not they'll be receptive to your time frames, and because they're paying so much in rent, is going to be something to mitigate as well. So yeah, interesting.
Yeah, totally. That's a good thing to do. Like, I've done it before, going to a tenant and just saying, listen, there's just been so much maintenance that the owner, wasn't expecting. Is there anything on your list that is, like, we're not ignoring the list, but is there anything on the list that is bothering you the most? And then talk to them through that, because it might be something that that you're surprised at, but they're the ones living in the property as well. So it's funny, isn't it? We can get complacent. Like, I'm sure there's loads of maintenance around my house, but I don't do it because you don't think of that. But then I'm sure if I was to ever vacate and put a tenant in there, I'm sure they would bring it all to my attention.
If we've talked about this, my husband and I, because we've been in this house for 7 years, and it is actually a real old Queenslander that's been fully renovated. We've pretty much decided if we move out, we're going to have it vacant for a month or two, fixing all the stuff that we've let go, because it's like, oh yeah, we'll get to that. And like, it's amazing the like level of complacency to a certain extent when you compare it to if a property was tenanted. It's like, oh, whoops, I haven't had my aircon cleaned in 2 years or whatever it is. Like, it's there's a big difference between owner occupiers and some tenants on the expectations of how it should be. So that's the joys of property management, mitigating.
That great question, though. I really like that one. So hopefully it's helpful for anyone that's listening or watching. And if there are any other questions that you have, please send them through to Jackie or myself so that we can ask them or bring them as a topic on our weekly show and answer them online, because they are very, very helpful, I think, for everyone that's listening, investors, property managers as well. So it's great.
Yeah, I will say, just on a closing note, it does get better. After the first 12 months, it does get better. It feels very expensive at the moment, but it's a long-term vision. So it's like, try and keep positive, make a plan with your property manager, and eventually you'll talk to your property manager and be like, oh, there's no maintenance, and it'll be fun.
Yeah, amazing. All right, Jackie, I'll see you next week.
All right, see you next week. Bye.